In the initial scene, a man named Terenzio races into a Brazilian air terminal.
He is noticeably terrifying and in a rush.
The vast majority would think he is failing to catch a plane, yet reality can't be further from that. He asks the assistance work area for any paths toward the west, but figures out the closest one is 2 hours later.
Still, he purchases the ticket only for crossing the terminal. At the same air terminal, a popular powerhouse, Inez, is video chatting with a friend in New York when, unexpectedly, she stifles and falls unconscious. Inez is stressed, particularly since she can do nothing to help her.
Outside, people watching the television see that the TV journalists and live show hosts have dropped before the camera.
That, as well as an entire row of individuals, are lying unconscious on the ground.
The watchers figure it should be some sort of joke, except for Terenzio, who realizes what is happening. He says it is the ideal opportunity for him to act and hurries to the terminal.
When a watchman is diverted, Terenzio grabs his weapon and requests that everybody move.
He races to a flight that is going to take off to Moscow shortly. Just a few travelers have loaded onto the flight when he gets inside and holds everybody at gunpoint. The pilot is absent, and the CO pilot, Matthew, would rather not assist the psychological oppressors.
As they fight for the firearm, a shot hits Matthew's palm and harms him.
Outside, the travelers are alarmed, and the airline steward, Gabriel, attempts to keep them quiet.
Terenzio emerges from the cockpit, inquiring as to whether there is a pilot on board.
A lady named Sylvie gets up, despite the fact that she is just a resigned helicopter pilot.
Under Terenzio's orders, she and Matthew bring off with any remaining travelers.
The flying is broken due to the slug, and thus nobody from the plane can contact anyone outside. When the plane is airborne, Sylvie and Matthew make an honest effort to dissuade Terenzio, but the man remains resolved.
He says that he is an official relegated to NATO and knows something that they don't.
After being encouraged, he uncovers that the sun's rays have become destructive.
Beginning the following day, the dawn will kill everyone, even the people who stay inside. This has previously begun in eastern countries like Japan and Korea, and the plane will be the following objective if the dawn finds them.
Matthew and Sylvie don't trust him and hypothesize that he is deranged.
Terenzio likewise recognizes that he could appear to be a blockhead, but guarantees that he isn't. Matthew's hand is draining significantly, which could cause an issue over the long haul.
One of the travelers, named Laura, is a home health medical attendant for an elderly person with dementia. She is the main clinical expert ready, so she assumes the responsibility of assisting the pilot.
They have no sewing pack to contain the injury, so they utilize a warm blade. Matthew shouts in torment, and the travelers alarm considerably more. Matthew knows that assuming they begin to fight, everybody's life will be in peril.
Subsequently, he tells them that they will land at a different area, according to Terenzio's desire, prior to proceeding with their path to the original objective. Matthew hopes that the warrior jets are acting the hero since they were taken at gunpoint, but for reasons unknown, Sylvie feels like they're on their own. A traveler named Ies has heard them discuss the sun and is suspicious that the pilot is misleading them.
Unexpectedly, an Arab traveler starts hacking and falls unconscious. Ies claims to help him and then grabs Terenzio's firearm in the process. Terenzio is locked inside the latrine at Ies' request, and Matthew is asked to come clean.
The pilot reveals they are arriving in Iceland because Terenzio wanted to head off somewhere west.
There, the police will capture the fearmongers, and the others will be let free. He also educates them about the sun and how Terenzio figures it will kill individuals.
This sends the travelers into a craze.
They start reviewing unusual things that occurred before they loaded onto the flight and are stressed over their families. Matthew quiets everybody and assumes the liability to save them, generally as the skipper.
Sometime later, he attempts to land at an air terminal in Iceland but gets no transmission from traffic light.
When they can see the ground close up, they notice several planes have collided with one another, and individuals are going around. They at last register that Terenzio was coming clean, but since the runway is hindered, they can't sit down. The plane only has sufficient fuel to fly a cycle west to Scotland. Hence, the chief chooses to do so and stays cautiously optimistic. He brings Terenzio out of the latrine so the man can let everyone know what's going on. He unveils that he learned about the sun by snooping on his senior's discussion.
He doesn't have any idea why it is happening, or if it will stop anytime soon. All he knows is that to endure, they must take off from the dawn. In the meantime, the Arab man who passed out earlier is still on the floor.
He struggles to breathe and is going to go into heart failure. With his final gasps, he says that he swallowed jewels.
The attendant, Laura, makes an honest effort to pull the precious stones from his butt, to save him, but her endeavors go to no end.
Simultaneously, they go through a crisis landing in Scotland, where Matthew stops the plane very close to reaching a stopping point.
They head outside, and their phones start ringing with warnings from their loved ones. The web is loaded up with news about dangerous daylight.
Half of the world has kicked the bucket, and the other half is sitting tight for their demise.
The air terminal is vacant because everyone who got the opportunity to take off has escaped, and the others are concealing in dim spots, trusting that it will safeguard them. Anyway, the news suggests that individuals are biting the dust even inside dugouts. Out of nowhere, they are approached by 3 IF servicemen requesting assistance.
They have just a short time before dawn, so they choose to gather significant supplies and fly west.
One of the travelers is an airplane engineer, Jacob.
He needs to return to his pregnant spouse to save her, but for the general security of the travelers, he is asked to step back.
In the wake of gathering supplies and filling the plane's tank, they take off once again. One of the servicemen is a pilot and proposes they fly away from the equator to stay away from the sun getting up to speed with them faster.
Their next stop is Canada, where they will fuel up the plane again and fix the radio.
Sometime later, the web is fixed, and their phones all begin to ring.
They get the last messages from their loved ones who have already passed on in Brussels.
Then, a man finds an article saying that the reason for the calamity is the sun's extremity.
Another traveler named Horst is an environment specialist and understands what a sun's extremity implies.
He makes sense of that like clockwork. The sun's attractive field switches, but no one knows why it meaningfully affects the world, so not much examination has been done.
Anyway, over the past many years, the power of the inversion was becoming more vulnerable. As a result of this, Horst thinks the inversion has become substantially more remarkable in the other direction.
Assuming what he is talking about is valid, the Earth is being impacted with gamma beams wherever the sun falls, which is the reason individuals are kicking the bucket in a flash. They have no real way to demonstrate the hypothesis because the researchers who published the article are probably also all dead. Right then, IS figures out a news report saying that the IF servicemen they got are actually fearmongers from Afghanistan.
They were captured and were being taken back to their country.
At the air terminal outside, one of them gets into an argument and pushes the elderly person who has dementia.
It causes his demise and gains the fear-based oppressor the traveler's dissatisfaction.
Being a fearmonger is cool, but pushing elderly folks people. Fella, Sylvie enlightens Matthew about the news report, and the two decide to leave the fearmongers when they land in Canada.
A few moments later, they land and have 2 hours before dawn.
A few survivors of the daylight lie around in the city. The psychological militants are asked to search for fixed radio parts in the closest shop. They agree, but insist on taking Gabriel and Jacob with them. The problem is that Jacob is familiar with the arrangement, but not Gabriel. Consequently, when they are in the shop, and Jacob secures the fearmongers in a room, Gabriel won't accompany him. Jacob wastes no time trying to persuade her. In the end, he comes to the air terminal while being trailed by the psychological militants, but Gabriel is left back in the city. The plane takes off without her. The fearmongers follow it and can hit a window with a projectile. Luckily for the travelers, it only makes a crack, so if they keep a level elevation, it won't break. A critically ill youngster named Dominique is also on the flight. Ice tries to visit with him, but his overprotective mother, Zara, requests that the man disappear.
Unexpectedly, they get a radio transmission from someone in Hawaii.
The discussion is stopped, but they expect that a few survivors are staying in a submerged bunker, which is why they are alive.
Matthew wants to leave for Hawaii straight away, but Sylvie thinks going there because of a muddled message would be dumb.
Meanwhile, Terencio is enraged that the skipper will pursue every one of the choices. He fights, and everyone comes to an arrangement that they will cast a ballot to settle on a choice from this point forward. Right when things begin to calm down, a few cautions ring simultaneously, demonstrating an airplane glitch. After examining the issues, Matthew discovers that one of the fearmongers who was following the plane before has, in some way or another, joined himself to the arrival gear.
Assuming he stays there, they can't land. So Matthew chooses to fly as high as conceivable so the temperature and lack of oxygen will bring him down.
Anyway, he neglects to consider the cracked window.
Because of the pressure difference, it breaks, causing disarray inside the plane.
Things fly out of sight as the travelers prepare themselves for impact. Matthew rapidly carries the plane to a lower elevation
and Jacob utilizes a wooden board to close the window for quite a while. Everyone calms down, but Dominic has trouble breathing since his respiratory cylinder took off. IS thinks about an arrangement and utilizes the oxygen line to make a respiratory cylinder. Zara is grateful and embarrassed that she was mean to IS before. The chief lets everyone know that Hawaii is not a choice since they won't ever arrive there on time at this height. The most probable option is to land in ATU, an Alaskan island. Besides, the choppiness couldn't dispose of the hanging psychological militant.
This person would be Superman in the event that he wasn't. You know, a fearmonger.
IS Jacob and Terencio go to the underside and make an opening on the plane's floor to get a perspective on him.
Terencio utilizes his weapon to point into the dim, but the lawbreaker pulls it and nearly kills him. Fortunately, IS acts the hero and shoots the psychological militant dead. He turns into their legend for a couple of moments before the travelers figure out that he was the reason the Middle Eastern traveler kicks the bucket. They cover his body back in Canada, where a person saw IS cut his stomach open. IS admits he is an extortionist who was sneaking precious stones from Brussels to Moscow. The jewels were inside the Middle Eastern man's body with his assent, but he passed on because he didn't adhere to the overreacting instructions. Upon hearing the admission, a few travelers fight that IS ought to be deserted like the fearmongers, but the general vote falls in favor of IS. Subsequently, he is bound in the aeronautics narrows. In the following scene, they land in the frozen north and top of the tank again prior to taking off. Once airborne, the climatologist Horst finds something peculiar. The natural products they got in Canada taste like they have no flavor. He thinks it is because the gamma beams are so intense that they are rebuilding the atomic construction of the food. The most unsettling part is that it decreases the dietary benefit of the food. If this goes on, they will starve to death in a matter of weeks. The science in this film is wild. Matthew recognizes the risk but guarantees that their essential concern ought to be taking off from the sun. He has begun to fail to keep a grip on himself in the beyond a couple of hours. Sylvia requests that he take a rest, but he hollers at her, which is not normal for his usual self. The travelers choose to compel him to rest and bring him outside the cockpit. Albeit irritated, Matthew vows to rest for the following couple of hours. Sometime later, they pick up another transmission on the radio and hear two gatherings talking, but the gathering only hears them say Tara 17. They sort out that the individual chatting on the telephone is a cosmonaut in space. They are stunned that someone like that is alive, but this likewise implies he is conversing with the control room, which is on the Earth, with restored trust for endurance. They choose to go to NATO Central Command in Brussels, where everything began. Going on like this, they will have 4 hours after they land in Brussels until the sun comes out. Consequently, they might discover some data about the secret shelter in the Central Command with Terencio's assistance. Outside, Laura finds Matthew oblivious in the latrine. Incidentally, the injury on his palm has been tainted and caused blood harming. For this reason, he had been acting the manner in which he did before. To tackle the issue, they need to sever the contaminated tissue. Laura says she can do the activity in Brussels, assuming they figure out how to arrive at a clinic. Anyway, without Matthew, Sylvie can't set down the plane on her own. The travelers besiege her since she is the closest thing to a pilot they have, but she realizes that she can land a helicopter. Horst causes her to grasp that in the event that she doesn't step up to the plate, everybody will bite the dust. Following that, Sylvia is made to watch a couple of recordings on the best way to set down a plane. Anyway, when she needs to really accomplish the work, she overreacts. A forceful disturbance hits, and everybody prepares themselves for the most obviously terrible. In the end, they go through an unsteady arrival, but other than that, both the plane and the travelers are protected. Everybody applauds Sylvie and partakes in the snapshot of accomplishment in the midst of the fiasco. Not burning through much time, they divide into 3 gatherings to do various errands. 2 men stay at the air terminal to top off the fuel. Sarah, Laura, and her gathering carry Matthew to the closest medical clinic while Terencio is and a man named Rick go to the NATO base camp. At the clinic, they find various dead bodies obstructing passages. By the vibes of it, individuals were educated about the passings before dawn and were attempting to save their lives. Laura orders everybody to overlook the confusion and spotlight on saving Matthew. Simultaneously, Sarah fills her sacks with medication for her child and for the others. In the meantime, at NATO Central Command, Terencio shows them the meeting room where he originally caught wind of the debacle. They can't go through every one of the papers with the time they have left,
so Rick chooses to check whether the reconnaissance film has something. While he is away, Terenzio ridicules Ayaz's Turkish plunge, and the two get into a battle.
In no way like bigotry toward the apocalypse, he coincidentally hits Ayaz, making him fall oblivious and drain vigorously.
Elsewhere, Rick finds a recording of the authorities discussing a dugout under a dam in Bulgaria.
The spot's name is Terra 17, exactly the same thing they heard on the radio a couple of hours prior.
Before he can return to the folks, Terenzio comes to him and lets him know that Ayaz has proactively left.
Rick sees Ayaz's body lying in a pool of blood on the screen, but is excessively frightened to talk. 30 minutes before the dawn, everybody gets onto the plane.
Matthew isn't in his best state, but feels improved after the medical procedure. Terenzio lets everybody know that Ayaz drove away before them, but they can never again sit tight for him to get back. With overwhelming sadness, they turn over the motors when unexpectedly a vehicle stops before the plane, and Ayaz turns out. In the accompanying scene, Terenzio is being cuffed in the flying straight.
Sylvie lets everybody know that on the off chance that the Bulgaria plan doesn't work, they will not have sufficient fuel or time to arrive at one more objective.
When they contact down, everybody should be prepared because they will only have 20 minutes to head to the area of the dugout.
Ayaz is in the latrine when unexpectedly he gets a seizure.
It endures only a couple of moments, and he thinks it is on the grounds that he has lost a lot of blood.
Anyway, he ceases from letting the others know.
When he comes outside, he is asked how he needs to manage Terenzio. Not having any desire to condemn him to death, he permits the person to accompany them to the fortification.
Sometime later, they land at a Bulgarian terminal and separate into two gatherings riding two unique vehicles. Sylvie drives the principal vehicle and leads the way while Ayaz drives the subsequent one. On the manner in which he gets a seizure again, making them crash, the primary vehicle has previously determined far away, and the gathering has no real way to keep up in the brief time frame. At a convergence, Sylvie takes the right turn and arrives at a half-open entryway.
A traveler has a go at contacting it, and is sent flying because of the power.
Additionally, incidentally, they need to keep squeezing a button for the entryway to remain open.
To vindicate himself, Terenzio offers to sit tight for the others while Sylvie and the gathering go inside.
Prior to leaving, Sylvie binds him to the stand so he won't sell out them.
It likewise affirms that he might be free when the other gathering shows up. Anyway, Ayaz and the gathering veer off in an unexpected direction at the convergence and arrive at a similar door from the opposite side of the dam.
They utilize their garments to move up and past the entry. In the end, they generally arrived at the entry to the dugout.
Despite the fact that they took various ways out, the travelers are at last gotten by military men, who invite them inside and confirm that they are protected here. Terenzio is let be, asking God for pardoning. As the sun rises, he stands confronting it and requests that it give its all.
In the end, he is additionally killed.